So every interview I had was, thank you, here's the gospel, and just an easy way to enter into Jesus is more important than any of these things. And it came to a decision, plant the church or professional soccer. And in my mind, there was no question that planting the church was more important.
Hello, and welcome to More Than Sunday, a weekly podcast where we take a deeper dive into the stories, themes, and questions of our faith. My name is Eric Chakowski. I'm one of the worship directors here at First United Methodist Church Richardson, and with me every week is one of our associate pastors, Josh Fitzpatrick. Josh, good morning to you.
Good morning, Eric. It's a good day.
It is a good day. We are in June. Today is June the 5th. Summer vacation for those families with kids is upon us. For the rest of us, work just continues on as usual. There's nothing really different, right? All those people, oh, summer, yeah, that sounds nice. But we are in full swing here at the church, and actually the closest thing on our radar, next week we have 720 kids coming for Vacation Bible Camp here to sing and play and learn about Jesus, and we couldn't be more excited for the opportunities that are offered to kids for the summer. VBC is one that kind of kicks it off, but we've got arts camps and science camps and sports camps and all sorts of stuff that we're really excited about.
And speaking of sports, this morning we have an incredible guest who plays professional soccer for FC Dallas. I met him just on the playground. He has a really, really good story.
Your kids were there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Our kids were both playing on the playground, and we were the parents sitting on the side and started chatting because I saw he was wearing a Sacramento Kings hat. And so that started the conversation. I asked him about California because I'm from California. And from there, I got to hear a little bit of a story. And I said, you know what? I want you to be able to tell this story to our podcast audience. I think it'd just be an incredible story to share. So this morning, we are really excited to be able to interview Ryan Hollingshead. Well, this morning on the podcast, we have the privilege of interviewing a professional soccer player from the FC Dallas team. His name is Ryan Hollingshead. It's good to have you here this morning, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, so just to set up a little context for our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about what FC Dallas is and tell us a little bit about your day job?
Yeah, so my day job is actually pretty great. I wake up, go to practice at about 9 a.m. I'm usually done by about noon and get the rest of the day to spend time with my family, spend time with my kiddos, which is awesome. So I play professional soccer, FC Dallas, depending on who you talk to. Either people know exactly what FC Dallas is and they love it, or they've never heard about FC Dallas, and they're like, what is that? I've never heard about it. I'm like, you live in Dallas. But it's in Frisco, so it's like a little bit removed, and because of that, I don't know how much people know if they're, in the city or in these different areas, but it's growing like crazy. It's been an awesome time here. I'm 6 years in right now, so it's my 6th year here, and it's been great. So that's my everyday. My everyday is practice every day. Sometimes we get one day off a week, and then games on the weekends.
And how long is the season?
Season's long. So we start preseason the end of January. Our first official regular season game is beginning of March, and then we end end of October.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's long, but it's funny because in comparison to U.S. sports, off seasons are much longer. Every other sport has a longer off season, minimum being about 3 months. But in terms of world football, world soccer, we have the longest break of any professional club out there. So, these guys like Messi and these EPL teams and Liverpool and these things, they get 2 weeks off for their entire offseason. They're right back at it. So it's crazy. We complain all the time. We want a longer offseason, but then everybody pushes back and says we already have a crazy offseason. So it's good.
Man, this is super fun to talk about. For me, soccer is my favorite sport. Grew up playing a little bit of club here and there. And so, all of us kids who played had dreams of playing professional soccer, and you've had the opportunity to do that. What does it take to become a professional soccer player?
Yeah, I mean, just like anything else in your life, it just takes a ton of work and a ton of commitment. So I think a lot of people have this idea that you're just born talented. Everybody just kind of has that talent and it works out for you. Maybe a little bit of that is true, right? Maybe a little bit of it is genes or a little bit of a talent. But most of it is just a ton of hard work, man. It's a ton of hard work. Since I was 3 years old, so I have three brothers. Two of them are older and one's younger. And I remember being 3 years old and being at a soccer field with my two older brothers while their team was practicing. And so I was like, well, I either sit in a lawn chair on the side of this field or I learn how to play with these guys because that sounds way more fun.
I had the same experience. Yeah.
So I did. I just learned how to play. And so then when I was 8 or 9 or 10 years old and they're like, hey, you can play on your own team now, I went back down and played with my aged players. And I was like, oh, this is pretty easy. Like I think I got this down. I'm used to playing with guys that are a lot bigger, a lot faster, a lot stronger. And so at that point, I'd kind of just become a better soccer player without ever knowing it or really realizing what I was doing or having any end goal of I'm training myself early at age 3 to become a professional soccer player, So a lot of that just kind of came as it came. But once I started realizing that the skill was there and that I had some of the talent, was put in a spot to be able to do it, it started with a lot of hard work. I mean, running sprints down my neighborhood street, getting my brothers to play with me in the front yard, all of that stuff just constantly.
And so you went from 3 years old to sprints in the backyard to high school and then club teams, or what brought you to the point where you got to go to UCLA and play there?
Yeah. So I played my collegiate ball at UCLA. I came from a very small town outside of Sacramento, California. And so my club team did not have national prowess. It wasn't well known nationally. And so it was really, really hard to get recruited. Just like any other recruit, you're sending emails to coaches saying, hey, look at me, come out to one of my games, watch me play. I could play here. You just need to come see me. And like most emails, they get ignored, or maybe one or two coaches. And I remember that changed. I was at it was like one of the big national tournaments in SoCal. Nomads is one of them that was in San Diego. I don't remember the name of the other one. And in that tournament, a lot of college coaches are just already there because they're coming to scout other players. And so I had sent out like one final email just saying, just come look at me. You're already here. I'm going to be there. Come watch me play. I know you don't know my team. And one of the coaches from University of Washington on the West Coast was there and saw me and watched me play and then was really interested after watching me play. And then I was able to use his interest in me to get other teams interested in me, if that makes sense. So I was able to then go to Stanford and go to UCLA and go to Cal and go to some of these other West Coast schools and say, hey, look, Washington's serious about me. Does that change your mind? And that slowly did. And then this is the craziest thing about all of it. My oldest brother had walked onto the team at UCLA, which hadn't been done in a decade. Nobody has done this before. And he just had so much grit. He just went for it, tried to walk on, and made himself a spot on the team. And so in his final year, as he was basically ending his career at UCLA, he was talking with the head coach and kind of describing what he had seen in his time there. And the head coach asked him, why have we not gone further? We're always in the tournament. We're often in the Final Four. How come we haven't won a championship in the last couple years? And my brother's point, his whole kind of crescendo was, you're bringing in guys that just think all they need is their talent and they don't try hard at all. And what you need are guys like my brother who's got talent and works his butt off to help the team.
Yeah.
And so I literally got a phone call the next day. And he's like, you want to come play at UCLA? I was like, let's do it.
Good job, bro.
Yeah, so thanks,
That's
bro.
awesome.
Yeah, tons of hard work. His name's Scott. He'll come into the story later as well.
Okay.
But yeah, what an amazing opportunity. I had been emailing UCLA. We had maybe a little bit of contact, but once my brother had that conversation, it was a done deal.
That's cool.
So how long did you play at UCLA before you entered the MLS draft?
Yeah, so I played all 4 years there. The way the MLS draft works is you have to be a senior to be able to enter into the draft. So there's another way to enter into professional soccer through what's called a homegrown system. So if you play in a club's academy, so here in FC Dallas has their first team, the professional team. They also have a handful of youth teams, academy teams. And if you play for those academy teams, they have your rights to just sign you as a 16-year-old kid to come play for them. If you don't, or if you live in a small town outside of Sacramento that doesn't have access to any academy team, there's no MLS team in that area, then you go to college most likely, and then from college as a senior, you can get drafted out. That's the second way. The third way is there's a handful of guys, maybe 6 guys a year, that get what's called Generation Adidas, and they're basically noticed as up and coming stars of American soccer that are not seniors yet, but have enough talent to be professional. And as a way to kind of keep those guys in the U.S. playing soccer here rather than going overseas, they give a handful of those guys a generation Adidas contract and allow those guys to leave college early and enter professional soccer.
That's what they were asking me to do when I
You're like,
just go to seminary instead.
Yeah. When God called me away from professional soccer. No, but seriously about MLS draft and about taking a pause, you didn't immediately enter the MLS draft, right? Or did you get drafted and then not? How did that whole process work after college?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it quick because it's a weird process.
Okay.
So my wife had spent the year earlier, half a year in Haiti, helping run an orphanage in Haiti. And so we then, throughout that next year, were dating, got engaged. I graduated school in December. And in that year, we had talked about going back and visiting and me seeing just what was such a big part of her life, the people down there, the orphanage down there. So I graduated in December. The two of us went to Haiti in January for the entire month to just experience what she had experienced and be a part of what she had been a part of. And when we were there, that was the same time as the MLS Combine, the MLS Draft, all of those things. And so from day one, I said, don't draft me. I'm not going to be there. I wasn't at the Combine. I wasn't at the draft. I just said, don't be there. What happens is I had planned this thing with my brother, which we'll get into, but basically coaches will call you beforehand and they'll say, hey, how do you see yourself playing in Seattle? Or do you see yourself playing in Kansas City? Is this a city you'd want to be in here in, Columbus or Portland, whatever? So the coaches start calling you before they draft you. They want to make sure it's a good fit. And so I'm getting these calls from coaches. There's 20 teams in the league. I got calls from maybe 10 of the coaches asking about if I would want to be in their city. And every time I said, don't draft me, I don't want to be there. I'm going to plant this church with my brother. Don't draft me. And so one of the teams from Seattle had a head coach, Ziggy Smith, who used to be the head coach at UCLA. And so we knew each other. And so when I told him that, he said, hey, leave your name in the draft. I'll draft you in the end rounds, the supplemental rounds. And that way, if anything happens, you want to come back and play, Seattle has your rights. And I was like, all right, that sounds fine. I'm not going to come play anyway, but no harm, no foul. Let's do that. So that was the only conversation that I had about keeping my name in the draft. And the rest of it, I was in Haiti. So I had no internet access, no cell phone access. So I had no way to contact any of the other teams. And I just assumed everybody was going to hear from the teams I did talk to, don't draft this guy. He's not coming. He's been very clear he's not coming. And so I got back into the States at the end of January, beginning of February, and my phone just exploded with all these calls, all these texts that I had missed when I was in Haiti. And they're almost all from FC Dallas saying, we had drafted you in the second round.
No way.
Yeah. And I was like, that was a terrible decision. What'd you guys do? What a huge mistake.
No way.
So I called him up and I was like, you guys know what my plan is, right? And they're like, yeah, we heard what your plan was. And I was like, so why did you draft me? What a mistake. So their response was basically, let's keep in touch. We're guessing you're a competitive guy, and it's going to be hard for you to hang this up and say no to this. So let's keep in touch and see what happens. And I was like, all right, man.
So at that point, you had no plans of going into professional soccer. You were going to plant a church with your brother.
Yeah, so my brother and I had decided years before. He had become a believer. He had given me my first Bible. Through that Bible, the Lord saved me. And so we had just begun this vision and this dream of what a church would look like if we were to plant a church. And so for years, we had dreamed about it, talked about, the statement of faith, the doctrinal statement, started writing out these things that we wanted to kind of be the foundations of the church, the pillars of the church. And so a lot of those things don't change, right? It's a Christian, non-denominational church, so many of those things are the same, but we just loved getting into it and just kind of sharing the vision of what we wanted. And in that time, I had committed, my oldest brother, Scott, was going to be the teaching pastor. It was clear from the moment he got saved, he just had a gift in loving people, pastoring people, and in teaching and preaching. And so I was going to be there to help that process and do everything else I could do. And so we had kind of committed to this duo of, we're going to do this thing. We're going to plant this church. And so he went through this process of church planting through Harvest Bible Chapel in Chicago. It's no longer a church planting network now, but he went through that for a year, and that end of that year coincided with the January that I got drafted. And so the year that he was in Chicago training and planting, he had already gone through seminary at Master's Seminary. And it just happened to meet up that I got drafted at the same time that he was moving back to our hometown to start the church, to plant the church that we had been talking about for years. And so I basically was on the phone with him that entire year, and I was like, I will be there. I would not miss this for the world. We're doing this thing. The Lord's behind this. This is where my heart is. This is where I want to be. And so it just happened that him getting back to Sacramento and me getting drafted was the same time. And so I had a choice to make.
So you obviously made the choice to go start this church and to follow through with that commitment you guys had made to each other. You had an opportunity at that moment to live out a dream that so many people have, to play professional sports. What sort of reactions did you get to that decision?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I got terrible reactions. I don't know that there was a single person, including parents, including best friends, including family members, that thought it was a good decision.
Wow.
Everybody was like, this is your one chance. You have a chance to play professional athletics. Like, who gets to do this? Nobody gets to do this. And so a lot of the advice wasn't don't plant a church or wasn't like disregard your faith. A lot of the advice was just like, you have so much time after. So go play soccer. And then when you're done at 33 or 35 years old or whatever, then come back and plant a church or then get into ministry. And so it was hard convincing them that the Lord had put this in front of me here and now, and that this is where my heart was. Like, this is what I wanted to be doing. And because the time frame wasn't perfect for going into soccer professionally, the compromise for me wasn't the church. The compromise for me was soccer. And so that was the decision.
That's awesome. That's so inspiring. And so you're with the church for about a year. At what point did God begin to re-navigate that vision towards soccer again?
Yeah, so it's a good question too. So we started February 4th was the first day, and there was 4 of us, me and my wife, my brother and his wife, and that was it. That was our church, 4 people. And so life looked like I was working a side job to just pay the bills. My brother was full-time ministry and partly getting a stipend from the church planting network that he was a part of before coming out to Sacramento. And the 2 of us would every day, we're meeting the clerks at the grocery store, our neighbors next door. I'm playing on a men's league soccer team. I'm inviting all the guys, bringing all the guys. We're talking to old neighbors. I'm reaching out to old high school friends, people who went to my old high school. I mean, we're just networking in any way that we can. And in that, just sharing the vision of what the church is, sharing the vision of what was then called Harvest Bible Chapel Sacramento is now called Doxa. And we were just sharing the vision of that with everybody we could. And so the setup was usually about once a month, we had a big vision meeting. And so February, March, April, one time in that month, we'd have a big meeting we can invite everybody to hear the vision, come on board, join in. And then the other weeks we'd have little mini kind of worship sessions, sometimes with 4 people, sometimes with 8 people, sometimes with 30 people. It just really, really depended on the week and who showed up. And then the Lord was just doing something, and all of that time and all of that obedience, the Lord was responding and moving. And I think what happened is we just kind of slowly saw the base, what we were calling the core group of that time, just grow. And it grew slowly, but it got to maybe July, August, and we were looking at about 75 people that were coming consistently. And we were meeting in the back of like a grocery store in this little community room with just like whatever was free, wherever we could try to meet. And so we were cramming 75 of us into this room, and my brother and I, in chatting through this, were like, I think we're ready. Like, I think there's enough buy-in here to kind of get our own space. Obviously, it's not going to be much, but get our own space and start trying to get this thing going. And so that was about August. And so we basically set our launch date of October 6th. October 6th was the weekend that we were going to officially launch. Get our own place, get our own equipment. We were renting out a cafeteria at the old high school that I went to. So it was just crazy what the Lord was doing. And it was incredibly difficult, but also the most fruitful time in my life, the most joyful time of my life, the time that I just was so secure in resting. I was doing what the Lord was wanting me to do. So July happened, August happened. We set our date of October 6th. And on that date, 225 people showed up. The church was up and running. Everything was so financially sustainable. And so about a week or two later, my brother looked at me and was like, hey, I have the funds to be able to hire somebody to do everything that you're doing. I could hire you, but then the two people on staff would both have the last name Hollingshead. And I don't know if that's the cult that we want to create here. And I was like, very, very true. So he's like, if you wanted to, now would be your time to go play. And then literally 2 days later, FC Dallas called me and said, hey, this is our last offer. We've kind of left the contract on the table this whole year. You've said no this whole year. We're going to make one final offer, and we want you to come start with us the beginning of next year, which is January. What do you say? And I was like, well, let's go.
That
Let's
is
go.
awesome.
Oh my gosh. So you come back and start playing professional soccer. What was it like then, transitioning into professional sports and being an outspoken Christian with that platform and in that industry, for lack of a better term?
I had become a Christian the end of my high school career, beginning of college. So college for me was almost like a shaping time in my faith in terms of there's a little bit of a platform being a college athlete. There's a little bit of a pressure in being a college athlete to maybe not follow your faith, deny your faith, make it not as important. And so that for me was 4 years of practice to be like, no, I love the Lord. I love Jesus. My life is centered on him and revolves around him. And that's what my life is going to look like. And so by the time I had gone to plant the church and then come back to professional soccer, I really had a good kind of organization around my life. I had a good routine around my life in terms of the way that I loved people, cared about my locker mates, cared about my teammates, and wasn't afraid to talk about my faith or talk about what I believed in interviews or in person. The other thing is, after my time off, coming back into professional soccer, every interview I had was about how do you take a year off and come back into soccer. So every interview I had was, thank you, here's the gospel, and just an easy way to enter into Jesus is more important than any of these things. And it came to a decision, plant the church or professional soccer. And in my mind, there was no question that planting the church was more important.
And I love that this choice that you made to follow what you felt very convicting on your heart to go plant this church, then the Lord continued to use when you return to the platform of professional soccer. And we choose to be faithful, and when we feel compelled to walk through doors that God has opened for us, God will continue to use those. That's an incredible thing.
Now, Ryan, in 2017, you were named the Advocare MLS Works Humanitarian of the Year. First of all, can you tell us what that award is? And then also tell us a little bit the story of how you earned that?
Yeah, so that award is offered to one player a year by the MLS, and it is basically recognizing some sort of outstanding work in the community. So it could be different guys who have raised money for childhood cancer, different guys who have either created their own organizations or led and basically been the head of a different organization. It takes forms in so many different ways. For me, the form that it took was I was driving down the highway in the middle of the winter. It was January, and there was hardly any cars on the road. It was a really icy night. It was snowing, or like Texas snowing. So there was some sort of like hail, snow, slush coming down, and the roads were really icy. And so there was hardly anybody on the road. I was actually going to pick up a friend who had gotten stranded on the side of the road. So on my way to pick up my friend, my wife is in the car with me. The car in front of us, and again, there's nobody on the road. So it was just a couple cars. So we're in the fast lane. The car in front of us, hydroplanes across to the right, all 4 lanes into the very far slow lane, and then overcorrected and came like shooting back into the middle of the road, the median, smashed into the cement barrier and bounced back out and was sitting in the middle of the fast lane. And the only reason I knew he was there was because I was literally driving right behind him. When he had smashed into the concrete barrier, both of his headlights went out, and he had popped back in and was sitting like perpendicular in the middle of the fast lane. And so we slowed down immediately, and I like kind of swerved around him. And then as I'm swerving around him, I'm like, this guy's going to die. Nobody is going to see him. There's no lights on this road. His lights are out now. And I think he's like passed out in the front of the car because nothing's happening. Nobody's moving. This all happens in a second. You know, it happens so quickly. I look at my wife. I'm like, I have to get him. So I pull over into the shoulder and I'm like, stay here. I have to get him. And so I get out of the car. I sprint back up the road, open his door. We're getting him out of his car to get him out of the middle of the street. And I get him out. We're standing on the side of the road and I'm just asking him, are you okay? Is everything okay? Can you focus? Like, how are you feeling? All these things. And as I'm talking to him, a car comes flying through the shoulder and hits my body, and just shoots me down the freeway. I don't even remember how far. And so I landed on the concrete and could not move a single part of my body. I was completely paralyzed, and I thought, well, this is it. This is like how I go. This is how I die. And then I realized, like, no, but I'm here. Like, I'm awake. I'm alive. Like, I'm thinking. But I was like, I can't move my body. So I was like, okay, I'm not dead, but I just can't ever move again. I'm paralyzed. And at that point, I had a young baby, and I was like, perfect. Like, I'll never be able to roll on the floor with my baby, and I'm definitely done playing soccer, that's for sure. And so I'm having all of these thoughts in my head, right? And then about 30 seconds to a minute later, feeling starts coming back into my hands. And so I start moving my hands and moving my fingers, and I'm realizing, oh, maybe I'm not paralyzed. Like, it's starting to come back. So I like kind of get on my elbow and I push myself up to my feet, and I'm moving. Like, my body's moving again. My feet are moving. And so I look around and I see like 30 or 40 yards up the road, the car that hit me. So I like hobble back up to the road to see kind of what had gone on. Actually, I went to go get my wife first out of the car, then came back up the road and just saw like the imprint of my body in the front of this person's car. The whole windshield was indented from my body. My shoes had flown off in the middle of the crash. And the guy that I was talking to was standing in the exact same spot. The car had missed him by a foot and had just hit me perfectly and sent me flying down the road. So I broke my neck in 3 places, which was the reason I was temporarily paralyzed on that time on the concrete, and then had to go through an insane amount of rehab and stuff after that. But so I got recognized nationally by the MLS because of that effort of trying to help this man out of his car and trying to help him get out of the fast lane.
That is absolutely one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard. So at this point that this accident happens, you're how far into your career?
Yeah, so this was 2017. This is my 3rd year in my career, yeah.
And how long
Beginning of my 4th.
did the recovery process take?
Yeah, so that recovery process was terrible. It was the worst thing I've ever been a part of, because in breaking your neck, what they do is they put you in a brace and you literally cannot move. So I laid flat on a bed without a pillow, unable to roll or move for weeks. And I just sat there. And you know when you're sleeping, right? And you wake up in the middle of the night and you're uncomfortable and you think, oh, I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to roll over and readjust and get comfortable again. That was all I wanted to do, and I just couldn't. So I'd wake up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., and I would just sit there for hours because I was so uncomfortable, but I couldn't move. I just sat in that like deep uncomfort. And more than the pain, more than like the shock, more than all of those things, I would do all of those things 100 times over to not have to feel like that deep discomfort in your bones.
Wow.
It was the worst thing ever.
And so sitting in that bed 3 a.m. for hours, did you ever have the thought that this isn't even worth it? Did you know you were trying to fight to get back to professional soccer, or were you just like, I'm hanging up the cleats?
Yeah, so when the crash had first happened and I was ambulanced to the hospital, the doctors looked at me and they're like, do not move any part of your body. And so I sat there and I was like, this is really serious. They think that I'm in grave danger here if something goes wrong, if I move incorrectly. And so that was the time I really questioned, am I ever going to play soccer again? Am I going to be able to compete at the highest level again? And then once I was in my bed and at home and had the neck brace and all that stuff, I knew I was going to heal. And it just depended on how seriously I was going to take it. The big question was I going to have to go through surgery, which with your spine means fusion. They fuse your bones in your spine together. And if that happens, a fusion happens, and that's to stabilize your spinal cord so that you don't go paralyzed or do something that will compromise that spinal cord, then you lose all of your mobility in your neck. So they fuse your bones together, but when your bones are not fused, that's what causes all the rotation in your neck. And once that's fused together, your rotation becomes very limited. Like you're barely able to move your neck. And so professional soccer and having to, have your head on a swivel at all times would be almost impossible, if not impossible. And so once we had gotten to the point where we thought we didn't need surgery, then I was all in on we're coming back. Like I'm going to make sure I come back.
And so for those who follow FC Dallas or watch the game, not to give a spoiler here, but you made it back to the field and through that long recovery process. Tell us about that moment when you got back on the soccer field.
Yeah, so for weeks, I was still in a neck brace doing just like body weight squats or doing little arm workouts or trying to sit on a stationary bike and just move my legs, trying to stay fit in whatever way I could. And so the process was about 6 months from accident to getting back on the field, which is a blessing. Like that's so much faster than I thought it was going to be. And the Lord was so gracious to me in the entire time and keeping me optimistic and continuing to just like let the healing process work speedily. And I'm so grateful for that. And so 6 months later, after all of the rehab, I got subbed into a game. I came in off the bench to like a standing ovation at the stadium. And it was just one of the best feelings going from, oh, I'm not going to be able to roll on the floor with my baby to I'm back playing professional soccer 6 months later is a very surreal feeling.
I would imagine this experience has shaped your faith. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact that it has had on your faith?
Totally. I think a lot of people think of, church planting. Of course, the Lord is so active there. You're having to work in ministry in a way that the Lord's presence is just there. And that's 100% true. But the Lord has been as present, if not more present with me here in my career with soccer and definitely throughout that injury, that I think I look back and see the Lord's hand in everything that he was doing. And so when I look back, I just think all glory to God, the way that he sustained me through the injury, the way that my breaks and my vertebrae in my neck happened in such a way that didn't need surgery. There's 3 ways they can break. Only one of them doesn't allow surgery. And all 3 of my bones were broken in the exact same way that didn't need surgery. So just like ways the Lord's hand was over the entire thing. And then again, creating these conversations, these built-in conversations. Ryan, why do you stop on the side of a freeway to help a man on an icy road when your wife is in the car? And again, I'm like, well, here's the gospel. Jesus stoops down into our life. He comes in, puts on flesh, leaves his heavenly throne to come to earth. And if I can step into somebody's life and help them in any way, share the gospel with them in any way, preach Jesus to them, I'm going to do that. And this was an opportunity to do that. And so all of these interviews that came from that were, again, just opportunities to share the gospel and another opportunity to share why my life kind of constantly revolves around my faith.
So you, hopefully, now that you're back from that injury, have several more years of playing ahead of you. What does life after soccer look like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. For the longest time, it's looked like going back to Sacramento and joining back with my brother, getting back into ministry. I would love that. I feel like that's what the Lord has been laying on my heart for a long time. But I have a couple years left. I've gotten into real estate a little bit on the side too while I've been here. So I've got kind of different passions, different things that I'm really excited about. But I think long term, like what my heart would really love to do, it's ministry.
Ryan, I could just have a conversation with you about all of these things for hours, but we've got one last question that we ask everyone on the podcast. And that question is this: at this point in your life, what is one thing that you wish someone would have told you?
Oh, man. Well, we'll stick with the story. I wish when I was considering not going to play professional soccer and going to plant the church, I wish that somebody besides my older brother, who was the teaching pastor of the church that I was helping, said that it was a good idea to go. Not that I needed that reassurance and not that it changed the path of what the Lord was leading me to, because we still went. But it was the hardest decision I had to make because I had to consistently fight these ideas of, am I making a bad decision? Am I making the wrong decision? A lot of what was preached was it's such a big platform, being a professional athlete, that you'll garner a lot more, even just respect or a lot more fame to then be able to point people to the gospel. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of true. Like, should I use this? And then I'll be able to share the gospel with so many more people if I'm a professional athlete, and I can always come back to ministry. And what I would have loved is somebody to just come alongside and be like, ultimately, the Lord's behind whatever decision you make. If you feel like he's calling you one way, go with it. But either way, whatever you do, do it in obedience to the Lord and do it as you're working for the Lord and not as unto men. And so if somebody would have come along and said that, it would have been super helpful. I had those voices. My wife was one of those voices. My brother was one of those voices. But every other voice in my life was different. So that's maybe one thing that I would change.
That's awesome. Well, Ryan, it's been a pleasure interviewing you. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it a lot.
As I listened to Ryan's stories, the main theme that kept coming to my mind was faithfulness. That in the midst of making one of the largest decisions of his life to choose to go plant a church with his brother rather than taking an opportunity to play professional soccer, in the midst of all kinds of people counseling him to go play soccer instead of live out this call that he felt conviction from God on his heart to do, in the midst of huge adversity in overcoming a personal injury that really threatened not only his career but his life, Ryan remained faithful and trusted that God continually had a plan for his life and always stepped into living it.
Today we want to leave you with a passage from Isaiah where God speaks through the prophet Isaiah in a time when the people of Israel are feeling lost in the midst of adversity, in the midst of this feeling of loneliness. God speaks these words of truth as God directs their paths. Isaiah chapter 30, verses 19 says this: "Truly, O people in Zion, inhabitants of Jerusalem, you shall weep no more. He will surely be gracious to you at the sound of your cry. When he hears it, he will answer you. Though the Lord may give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet your teacher will not hide himself anymore, but your eyes shall see your teacher. And when you turn to the right, or when you turn to the left, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'"
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of More Than Sunday. If you like the podcast, please feel free to share it, go online and leave a comment, or give us a rating so that others might hear about us. We've got a new episode coming out every Wednesday, so make sure you also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next episode. If you want to find out more about First United Methodist Church Richardson, you can find us online at fumcr.com as well as on Facebook and Instagram. Special thanks to Ryan Hollingshead for joining us this week, and make sure you tune in next Wednesday. Have a great week.